This presentation's on Tay-Sachs disease. Tay-Sachs disease is a genetic disease that affects the nerves and destroys them, ultimately affecting the spinal cord and the brain. A fatty substance builds up within the tissue and nerves, is generally fatal for almost all individuals that contract the disease, and generally consists of mainly young children. Overall, Warren Tay and Bernard Sachs were the first physicians that studied and were able to identify the disease, hence the name. Although in the 1800s, not much is known about the genetics, and the disease could be especially seen in Jewish individuals. Therefore, it can be seen in descendants from Eastern and Southern Europe. It caused many to look at Jews differently that migrated to the United States. Sinatra Okada and John O'Brien in the late 1960s really determined the cause and how it was related to enzyme defects. This pushed for genetic testing in infants and diagnoses of the disease. The physical symptoms that are expressed in the individual's phenotype changes based when the individual develops Tay-Sachs disease. The very first sign can be seen as a cherry red dot in the eye. If someone develops the disease before they are 6 months old, they begin developing symptoms that start as becoming blind or deaf, with other physical and mental potential deteriorates. It can lead into paralysis or atrophy within the body. They also have abnormal responses to sounds and other environmental factors. Ultimately, this disease will be lethal for children. In the juvenile stage of Tay-Sachs disease, the child will start to have symptoms of physical and mental potential deteriorating. This child will also show signs of ataxia, dysarthria, dysphagia, and spasticity. The last stage of life where Tay-Sachs disease is developed later in life is called late onset. Although symptoms such as speech and difficulty swallowing, spasticity, and lowering of mental and physical abilities, individuals that develop the disease later in life generally do not die from the disease. Although they don't die, these individuals will generally end up in a wheelchair. Generally, children will develop and show symptoms of the disease before 6 months old. This means that they generally will die before they reach the age of 4 years old. Although this is the most common form of the disease, there are 2 more stages that are possible. The next stage is the juvenile stage. They normally develop the disease from 2 to 10 years old. They will then perish from the disease at ages of 5 to 15 years old. The other stage of the disease is late onset. Individuals will develop the disease in their early 30s. Most of the late onset disease will not die from this onset. The affected gene is hexagene, or an enzyme called hexosaminidase A. The protein that is made from the gene is beta hexosaminidase subunit alpha form isoform 1 precursor. It is part of the glycosyl hydrolase 20 family of proteins. It is made up of 540 amino acids. A mutation affects this gene until a toxic buildup of GM2 ganglioside occurs, which is ultimately the cause of Tay-Sachs disease. The main mutation is an insertion mutation on 4 base pairs on exon 11. This is a toxin or fatty substance that affects the nerves, brain, and spinal cord. The protein, when affected, works with lysosomes that within the cells break down the toxic substances. The location of gene is on chromosome 15. The gene's locus is on the long arm of the chromosome. The shorter arm is labeled P, while the longer arm is labeled Q. This means the exact location where the hexagene that is responsible for Tay-Sachs disease when the mutation occurs would be listed as 15q23. The Tay-Sachs gene is between the SELF6 and TMEM202 genes. These are considered linked genes, or genes that can be carried on the same chromosome. Therefore, they are both also located on chromosome 15. This means the genes are more likely to be inherited together, and their primary responsibility is for protein coding. Tay-Sachs disease is an autosomal recessive gene. This means both parents must carry the recessive gene for a chance for their offspring to show that the gene is in their phenotype. If either parent holds the recessive gene, it will continually get passed off onto offspring until a generation will express the gene. This is an example of a pedigree for the disease, or how the disease can be passed down through the different generations. It shows the disease can be passed down throughout the generations without being expressed until the individuals acquire both recessive genes from both parents. Tay-Sachs disease is extremely rare since it's passed on through a recessive gene. Even if 2 individuals both hold the gene, there's still only a 25% chance their offspring will acquire it. It is only carried between 1 out of 250 to 300 people. There are only about 1 in 320,000 individuals that develop the disease. It can be seen more prevalent in generations of Jewish individuals since the disease is more common for them. There are several genetic test options for testing Tay-Sachs disease. The first option is a blood test that measures the enzyme activity of hexominidase A. Many use molecular testing to see if the mutations have occurred in the hexa gene. If this is confirmed, it's followed by an enzymatic confirmation. Another main test that is used is amniocentesis or chorionic villus sampling to test the fetus of an individual. Amniocentesis tests the fluid around the fetus, and chorionic villus sampling tests the tissues of the placenta for hexominidase A activity. Molecular genetic testing can also be done on these samples to see if the mutations from hexa gene have occurred. Some private companies, such as JScreen, also provide saliva sequencing to test for the same things, but in most situations, testing is done through a medical clinic. Although testing is beneficial for many parents and individuals, there are some disputes about it as well. Some individuals get false positives. Since testing can never be 100% accurate, false positives can tell future parents that their child has the disease. By doing this, some parents might choose to end a pregnancy because they are unable to afford the care for the child or the emotional trauma. False negatives also occurs. This can allow a parent to expect that nothing is wrong with their child. By doing this, it sets them up for false hope about the reality of their offspring. Overall, Tay-Sachs disease is a rare condition that has a lot of symptoms that go along with it, but can ultimately be tested based on what an individual wants to know.